The ranger's flashlight cut through the dense Washington morning fog like a scalpel. Beneath the collapsed boards of an old maintenance well, hidden deep in the overgrowth of Olympic National Park, something caught in the beam, pale, round, and unmistakably human. Minutes later, the clearing was sealed off with crime scene tape, and a silence, long dormant, returned to haunt the forest. Inside the well, search teams unearthed 10 human skulls, their placement intentional, almost ritualistic in arrangement, but there was no trace of clothing, personal items, or any signs of how they had ended up there, just a rusted keychain, a plastic compass, half melted, and a digital camera, corroded nearly beyond repair. It was this camera, cleaned and restored by forensic technicians in Seattle, that reactivated a case abandoned nearly a decade earlier, the 2013 disappearance of 5 hikers from the nearby Lost Creek Trail. At the time, the group's sudden vanishing had sparked a massive search operation, grabbing national headlines for a brief window. Then, like the mist that covered the forest that morning, interest faded. No remains had ever been found, no calls, no sightings, no trace. The families went home empty, clutching press conference photos and vague apologies from park authorities. Now, 9 years later, everything was about to be reopened. The group was comprised of 5 individuals: Scott Holloway, 32, an amateur wildlife photographer; his fiancée Megan Delaney, 28, a registered nurse; best friends Keisha Moore, 31, and Dana Reyes, 29, both school teachers, and Rob Tran, 34, an engineer with a passion for trail cartography. They were last seen checking in at the Lost Creek Ranger Station on June 17, 2013, logging a 3-day route along the Northridge Trail. Security footage from the station's exterior camera showed them laughing, sorting gear, and signing the ledger, time-stamped at 6:04 p.m. That would be the last verifiable moment they were seen alive. At first, their absence seemed explainable. The trail had spotty cell reception, and delays on hikes were common due to weather or terrain. But when no one from the group returned on the expected date, June 20th, Megan's mother filed a missing persons report. Ranger teams were dispatched within hours. Helicopters scanned the ridges. Canine units tracked until the scent went cold at a stream crossing. The only items recovered during the week-long search were a cracked plastic water bottle and a fleece beanie, both confirmed to belong to Scott Holloway. No campsite, no footprints, nothing to suggest where or why they disappeared. The official report, released 3 months later, concluded likely accidental disorientation leading to environmental fatality, with river sweep-off or mountain fall listed as probable causes, but no bodies, no final confirmation. The families were never convinced. Dana's father, Carlos Reyes, continued returning every year on the anniversary, marking trees with orange tags and reviewing satellite maps. They didn't all just vanish, he told a local reporter in 2018. 5 people don't fall off a cliff without leaving a trace. What the discovery of the well suggested was darker and far more deliberate. The skulls were recovered in pairs, except one, slightly smaller, which forensic examiners would later tentatively identify as Megan's. It was her camera that had survived. After weeks of data extraction, a single image file was recovered. A blurry photo showing the group standing beside a moss-covered trail marker, their faces smiling, unaware. Behind them, just barely in frame, a man, tall, bearded, wearing a ranger jacket. But there was no record of any ranger matching that description on duty that week. In fact, park records showed no additional staff assignments beyond the known personnel, none of whom resembled the man in the photo. The FBI entered the scene. Files were unboxed, witness statements from 2013 reanalyzed, phone records resubpoenaed, And buried deep in the original investigation's appendix, a minor note resurfaced. A trail hiker had reported seeing someone in uniform roughly 5 miles north of where the group had last checked in. The hiker, Brian Akins, had provided a brief statement at the time, dismissed due to inconsistencies. But with the photo, his words gained new relevance. Meanwhile, analysts working on the GPS metadata from the camera uncovered coordinates embedded in the image file, a spot roughly 2.8 miles east of Lost Creek Trail, far from the group's intended path, a blind spot in the original search grid. A second forensic sweep was ordered. They found torn canvas and remnants of a fire pit buried under a foot of brush. Charred but intact was a boot sole identified as belonging to Rob Tran, and near the edge of the embankment, something else. A rusted park-issued name badge. The name was still legible, though pitted with corrosion, B. Keller. No such ranger was ever employed at Olympic National Park. The name badge marked B. Keller would become the cornerstone of a new investigation, reopening the cold case of the Lost Creek hikers with fresh eyes and unsettling questions. Who was this phantom ranger? Why was his badge found near evidence linked directly to the missing group? And most pressingly, was he connected to their disappearance? The FBI liaison assigned to the reopened case, Special Agent Linda Morrison, explained the significance during a press briefing. This badge was never logged in our personnel records. It was park-issued, but to an unknown individual. That alone suggests possible impersonation, a serious federal offense, and potentially a key to understanding what happened to those hikers. Digging into background data, investigators scoured employment archives, vendor lists, and security logs. No one named Keller had ever worked or volunteered at Olympic National Park during 2013 or any surrounding years. The badge itself was older, a design discontinued in 2009. It was meticulously cleaned, suggesting deliberate preservation or careful concealment. Meanwhile, the families, who had long feared that the official investigation had stalled prematurely, were cautiously hopeful. Dana Reyes's sister, Emily, reached out to a local investigative journalist, Marcus Flynn, who had been following the story since its inception. Marcus recalls reviewing the original 2013 case files and being struck by contradictory witness statements. Some hikers who had encountered the group described a man watching from a distance on the first day of the hike, while others insisted the group had seemed nervous in the days before their planned return. One particular testimony stood out. A fellow trail user, Cynthia Harris, recalled an encounter on June 18, 2013, roughly 36 hours after the group began their hike. Cynthia stated she passed the hikers at a narrow ridge and noticed a tall, unshaven man trailing just behind them, wearing what she thought was a ranger uniform, but with no visible badge or ID. She remembered feeling uneasy as the man's gaze lingered unnervingly on her as she moved past. When pressed about his behavior, she described it as too intense, like he was studying us or guarding us. Despite reporting this detail at the time, the description was excluded from the initial investigation report for lack of corroboration. The recovered camera's images provided further clues. Aside from the group photos and scenic shots, metadata showed sporadic GPS signals. The device was moving erratically, sometimes off established trails, sometimes in areas dense with underbrush, inconsistent with the planned route. Forensic image analysts found subtle but telling anomalies. One photo showed a blurred figure in the background, partially obscured by tree branches, whose posture suggested confrontation. Another revealed a muddy footprint near a campsite, bearing unusual tread marks inconsistent with the group's hiking boots. The coroner's office released reports on the skulls found in the well. Though the remains were severely weathered and damaged from time underground, forensic anthropologists detected signs of trauma inconsistent with natural causes. Several skulls had depressed fractures, and one bore small puncture marks indicative of a sharp implement. No remains showed signs of animal scavenging, which was peculiar given the environment, suggesting that the bodies were deliberately concealed or protected post-mortem. Moreover, DNA analysis, limited by degradation, managed to partially confirm identities for 4 of the 5 missing hikers. Megan Delaney's remains were inconclusive, fueling speculation she might have escaped or was separated from the group before death. The investigation widened its scope to include possible suspects who could have had motives or means. The park's employee roster in 2013 was cross-referenced with criminal databases. A handful of former employees emerged, some with prior records for theft or harassment, but none directly linked to violent crimes. One figure drew special attention. Benjamin Keller, matching the badge's name, was an alias used by a man convicted in 2010 for impersonating law enforcement in Oregon. He had vanished shortly after release from prison. Authorities suspected he might have migrated to Washington State, potentially infiltrating park staff or impersonating rangers to approach hikers. Interviews with park personnel from that era revealed inconsistent accounts. Some recalled a ranger-like figure occasionally seen near the Lost Creek area who was never officially logged. A retired ranger, Robert Michaels, stated off-record that the park had informal, undocumented workers during busy seasons, creating loopholes that could be exploited. Further forensic examination of the camera uncovered a hidden audio file encrypted on the device, initially overlooked during extraction. The recording was grainy but unmistakable. Muffled voices, a heated exchange, and a sharp intake of breath followed by a sudden silence. The voices were partially identifiable. Megan's voice pleading, "Please don't," followed by an unidentified male voice saying, "This is for your own good." The recording ended abruptly. This chilling audio led investigators to theorize a possible abduction or forced detention scenario, rather than accidental disappearance. Simultaneously, a renewed search was mounted near the coordinates embedded in the camera metadata. Utilizing drones and ground-penetrating radar, teams scanned the forest floor. Several areas of disturbed soil were detected close to the well, indicating possible shallow graves or buried debris. Families waited anxiously as forensic teams carefully excavated one promising site. Among the roots and moss, a weathered backpack was uncovered, containing personal effects matching descriptions from missing persons reports. A partially burned map, a frayed notebook with illegible handwriting, and a tattered hiking boot. The notebook, after digital enhancement, revealed hurried notes, some appearing to be distress messages with phrases like, "Can't trust him, need help," and, "If found, tell them to look near the river." As the investigation progressed, police interrogated persons of interest who had been in proximity to the park during that summer. One such suspect was a local man, Thomas Granger, known for a history of stalking hikers and trespassing on restricted park property. Granger denied involvement, but exhibited inconsistent alibis. Phone records showed he was near Lost Creek Trail during the group's disappearance window. A search of his residence yielded hiking gear similar to that found in the group's belongings and photographs of the hikers from social media, raising suspicion. However, Granger was never conclusively linked to the crime scene or remains. His defense suggested he was a park enthusiast and an unfortunate coincidence. The case remained a tangled web of partial truths, unanswered questions, and emerging leads that contradicted earlier assumptions. The question lingered: did the Phantom Ranger Keller orchestrate a violent ambush? Was Granger a red herring? Or were darker forces at play within the forest's shadows? As forensic teams continued piecing together the scant evidence, the families struggled to reconcile the hope for closure with the frustration of ambiguity. The investigation, now in its second year since reopening, stood at a crossroads. The investigation into the Lost Creek hikers' disappearance had grown into a complex labyrinth of dead ends, ambiguous clues, and a slowly mounting tension between law enforcement agencies, families, and local residents. Each new lead seemed to split into two contradictory paths, casting doubt on previous assumptions. Special Agent Linda Morrison faced mounting pressure. The initial optimism had faded, replaced by an acute awareness of the case's fragility. Public interest was rekindled, but so were suspicions of police mismanagement and possible cover-ups. One of the earliest complications emerged when discrepancies surfaced in the park's internal logs. Digital timestamps from security cameras near the Lost Creek entrance did not match official reports. A detailed audit revealed that several camera feeds were inexplicably disabled for hours on the day the group disappeared. The official explanation cited technical malfunctions, but technicians later found that the outages coincided suspiciously with the time the hikers began their trek. Ranger supervisors refused to provide full access to personnel schedules or maintenance records, fueling speculation about internal obfuscation. Meanwhile, forensic teams revisited the skulls found in the well. A surprising new discovery came when microscopic analysis detected traces of a rare type of soil on the bones, soil that was not native to Olympic National Park, but instead found near a quarry located 120 miles away. This suggested that the remains might have been moved after death, possibly to confuse investigators. As the timeline unraveled, investigators uncovered that the group's planned route had been altered. Cell phone records showed a last ping near the North Ridge Trail junction, but data suggested the hikers then deviated eastward, toward an unmarked, overgrown path known locally as Widow's Walk. Locals told stories of Widow's Walk as a place where hikers often became disoriented, yet the park officially denied its existence on maps, and the trail had been closed years earlier for safety reasons. Marcus Flynn, the investigative journalist, tracked down a former park guide, Ethan Drake, who had knowledge of the area. Ethan recalled that the path was notorious not just for its dangers, but for unexplained disappearances stretching back decades. "It's like the forest swallows people whole," he said, eyes shadowed with unease. He also hinted at rumored secret activities in the area during the late 2000s, unofficial operations that involved unauthorized personnel. Amidst these accounts, the investigation unearthed a chilling possibility that the group may have been deliberately led off their planned route. The enigmatic figure in the photo, the Phantom Ranger, Keller, remained central. Surveillance footage from a gas station 15 miles from the park's entrance showed a man matching Keller's description, purchasing supplies the day before the disappearance. Witnesses described him as appearing out of place, and one recalled overhearing him mutter cryptic phrases about keeping the forest's secrets. However, Keller had vanished without a trace. Law enforcement's next breakthrough came with the testimony of a witness who had stayed at a roadside motel near the park days after the disappearance. The witness reported overhearing a man arguing on the phone, saying, "They won't be found, not ever." The man's voice was rough, controlled, and cold. The statement rekindled the theory that foul play was involved. But this theory faced counterpoints. A search of the park's records revealed no missing gear or personal effects beyond the recovered items. No physical signs of forced entry or violence were found at campsites. The remains' injuries could be explained as accidental falls or animal interactions, despite forensic doubts. The tension between accidental death and criminal intent permeated every interview and report. Public debate polarized the community. Some believed the hikers had fallen victim to a tragic accident compounded by poor park management and environmental hazards. Others suspected a more sinister narrative, an unknown predator, possibly using the guise of authority to lure victims. Meanwhile, families grappled with the strain of the prolonged uncertainty. Emily Reyes described her sister Dana as haunted but determined, organizing memorial hikes and awareness campaigns. Scott Holloway's parents petitioned Congress for stricter park ranger vetting procedures, citing the Keller mystery as evidence of systemic flaws. In a final push, the FBI enlisted a team of forensic linguists to analyze the distress notes found in the backpack. Their report concluded the writings were genuine, showing increasing signs of panic and confusion, consistent with captives trying to communicate under duress. But the missing puzzle piece, what exactly happened on those last days, remained elusive. Then came a startling development. Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen, the survivors from the 2022 dormitory murders at the University of Idaho, had come forward with a previously undisclosed connection to the Keller investigation. During questioning, they revealed having seen a man resembling Keller attending a local survivalist seminar years earlier. They described his demeanor as obsessive and secretive. This connection suggested a wider network of behavior, perhaps linking the park mystery to broader criminal patterns. The investigation was left at a precarious precipice, rich with fragments of truth, yet obscured by shadows. The case of the Lost Creek hikers had lingered in the shadows for nearly a decade, a tapestry of partial truths, haunting absences, and questions that refused to be silenced. Now, the final chapter sought to piece together the fractured fragments left behind. The discovery that linked Benjamin Keller to a survivalist seminar years before the disappearances expanded the investigation beyond Olympic National Park's borders. Authorities began to explore Keller's known associations, uncovering a pattern of fascination with isolation and control. Though Keller's whereabouts remained unknown, investigators found that his aliases appeared in multiple state databases connected to offenses ranging from impersonation to minor assaults, none directly tied to murder, but painting a portrait of a man capable of escalating violence. Meanwhile, forensic teams pursued an elusive lead. DNA traces extracted from soil samples near the well, faint but consistent with unknown individuals. Despite exhaustive comparisons with known suspects, the DNA remained unmatched in national databases, deepening the enigma. In Lakewood, Washington, family members attended a memorial service for the hikers, their faces marked by quiet resilience. Scott Holloway's father, John, spoke plainly. "We may never know everything, but we owe it to their memory to keep searching." Behind closed doors, the police files grew thicker with notes of witnesses, contradictory statements, and cold trail leads. The Widow's Walk Trail, once dismissed, was finally mapped and partially reopened for official exploration. Surveyors found remnants of campsite debris and faint footprints that did not match any of the hikers, suggesting possible encounters with outsiders. Despite these efforts, the critical question remained unanswered. What happened during those final hours? Was it an accident or something darker? The family's relentless pursuit kept the investigation alive, refusing to let the case fade into oblivion. Yet, the absence of definitive evidence left a void, one that justice could not fully fill. In reflecting on the case, Special Agent Morrison remarked, "This investigation underscores the limits of forensic science and human memory. Some mysteries resist closure, not for lack of trying, but because the truth is fragmented, hidden, or lost to time. For the families, the impact was profound. The unknown festered as a source of pain and unresolved grief. They spoke of the hollow space left by unanswered questions, the moments that might never be reclaimed. The Lost Creek hikers' disappearance remains an unresolved chapter, a haunting reminder of nature's indifference and the fragile thread that separates survival from tragedy. The well with 10 skulls stands as a silent witness to a story only partially told, a place where the forest guards its secrets with unwavering resolve.